This video is going to explore voting systems in the United Kingdom and Mexico. It will cover SMD, single-member districts, proportional representation systems, and a slice of multi-member districts. Single-member districts, or SMDs. This is when a country is divided into voting districts that are distinct geographic areas in which roughly the same number of people get one representative in the legislature of their country. In the United Kingdom, these districts are called constituencies. In the United Kingdom, each constituency or district sends one member of parliament to the House of Commons. These are called MPs, members of parliament. Each voter living in that district gets to choose from a list of candidates. Candidates are usually affiliated with a party. The winner is the person with the most votes, and they get to take that seat in the House of Commons. And they go representing the people who live in their district. This is a map of all the electoral districts in the United Kingdom for the House of Commons. You'll see some districts are geographically very large, and the ones around the major cities like London are very, very small. And that's because of population density. But overall, each of these districts represents about 92,000 people. There are 650 members of parliament in the House of Commons, and they represent the 650 districts of the United Kingdom. The UK is a bicameral legislature, but citizens only vote for one of the chambers of the two chambers, and that's the House of Commons. The House of Lords is not an elected body. Most SMD systems are plurality systems, or first past the post, which is a horse racing analogy. The winner of the election is the one who gets the most votes, or in the analogy, the horse with the fastest time. It doesn't matter if they don't clear 50%, as long as they have the most. In the United Kingdom, here's an example of an election from 2017. You can see that most of the districts were won by the Conservative Party, followed by Labour, and then followed by a variety mostly of regional parties. The UK ends up mostly with a two-party system, although sometimes they call it 2.5 because the Liberal Democrats in some elections pick up a good number of seats. The UK is a little unique too because there are regional parties that do well in the regions, especially the Scottish National Party. But you also have Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, or the Unionist Party, also in Northern Ireland, or Plaid Cymru, the party indicated by light green, in Wales. The Liberal Democrats are not a regional party, but they do well in sprinkled places across the country. They would do even better if there was proportional representation, as we will see soon. So why do SMDs lead to a two-party system? Well, because it's winner takes all. This is my friend Alistair Carmichael, a member of Parliament from Shetland and Orkney, the northernmost part of Scotland. And you can see that he won with 10,381 votes because he had the most number of votes. But you can see he didn't clear 50%. But in this system, it's winner takes all. Now, if you lived in Alistair's district and you liked the Labour Party, you can see Labour didn't get very many votes. You might decide, I'll either vote for Alistair or Robert Leslie because my party doesn't have a chance of winning, and I'd rather see Alistair win, for example. So this is where voters have to be strategic if their party isn't the majority in their region. So this is a single-member district. These dots represent all the MPs in the Parliament. So it's mostly Conservatives, followed by Labour Party, the red. And then you can see that the Scottish National Party picked up a bunch of votes, mostly in the Scottish districts, or only in the Scottish districts. And the Liberal Dems picked up a handful of votes in different districts, followed by some other regional parties. In other countries like the United States, you wouldn't even see this much variety. So if you are in an SMD system, you have to decide, do I vote my top preference or do I vote strategically? Well, it depends. If most people in your district share your political views, you can vote your favorite because you're likely to win. If you're a conservative and you live in a conservative area, vote conservative. Conservatives will carry that election. But if you are liberal and you live in a conservative area and you know that the party you like the best cannot win because there aren't enough liberals to carry the election, then you might want to vote strategically. Here are some examples. Would you vote for your favorite party anyway? Suppose you don't like the other parties, you don't like the Conservatives or the Labour Party, and you think, I'm going to lose anyway, so I'm just going to vote my favorite party so I can at least register in this election that there are a handful of people in this district who like my party. And maybe the Labour and Conservative leaders will notice that and maybe try to throw you a bone, something that your party supports that they could get behind in the next election to appeal to you, especially if there's a significant number of people who vote like you do, even though they are nowhere near a majority. Or let's say that you are a liberal Democrat and you really dislike Labour Party. Then maybe you want to vote to block the Labour Party from winning. You're not going to vote for the Lib Dems because you want to use your vote more strategically. So maybe you vote for the Conservative Party to block the Labour from winning. Or maybe you're a liberal Democrat and you like the Conservatives okay, but you're not crazy about them. And so maybe you vote for them because you can live with that party. So there are different ways to think about how to vote if you're in an SMD system and you are in the minority. But if you are in the majority, then you just vote the way you like. Again, the United States has a very strong two-party system. This is the Senate. The Senate is almost all Democrats and Republicans with just two independents. So it's winner takes all. It's really difficult for third parties or minority parties in the United States to get anywhere. It's even stronger than the UK because the United States doesn't have regional parties or a viable third party. In Mexico, they use SMD as well as proportional representation. So let's start with the SMD side. Mexicans vote for their president in an SMD election, and they vote for delegates in the House of Delegates. That's the lower chamber of their bicameral legislature. So they vote for their district where they live, and then they vote proportional representation, but we'll deal with that later. So the candidates who have the most votes, first past the post, plurality, can be less than 50% even, are the ones that win the election. You can become the president of Mexico or a delegate in the House of Delegates with 40% of the vote if you got the most votes. So the SMD side, here's a map of the single-member districts in Mexico. 300 of the 500 seats in the House of Delegates are chosen this way. So these are geographically based, and you can see in 2012 that the PRI, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, did quite well. In Mexico and in the UK, the executive is selected quite differently. In Mexico, the head of state and the head of government are the same person. It is the president, and citizens vote directly for that person. In the United Kingdom, the head of state is the monarch, never voted for. The head of government is the prime minister, and citizens do not vote for the prime minister. But they know when they vote for their MP who the party wants to put forward for PM, prime minister. So they're kind of indirectly voting for the prime minister, but they aren't actually voting for their executive. That's a major difference. In the SMD part of the election for Mexico, and with UK, which is all SMD, you've got one vote as a citizen for your national government. You vote for your member of parliament, which is the person in the House of Commons. In Mexico, you get several more votes. You have SMD for the House of Delegates, and so you vote in your district, and there's more in Mexico coming. Mexico is mixed. It has SMD, multi-member, and proportional representation. So what is a proportional representation system like? Voters vote for their preferred party, whether they're in the majority or the minority. It's a nationwide election, so the number of votes then gets counted, and the proportion of the votes by party basically mean that the parties have that proportion of seats in the legislature for the seats that are set aside for proportional representation. So if you like a small party like the Green Party, but the Green Party doesn't really do well in the SMD side of the election, but maybe there are enough people voting for Green in Mexico to get at least a couple members in the legislature through proportional representation. So you're not voting in your part of Mexico, you're voting as a Mexican, and all Mexicans' votes get pooled, and the proportion of the votes won by each party then gets seated in the legislature. So if the Greens win 5% of this vote, they get 5% of the seats that are set aside for proportional representation. So in the House of Delegates on the proportional representation side, you can see the election winners. And you might notice that the yellow ones, the PRD party, are able to pick up some seats that they might not have picked up if it was all SMD. Same with the Green Party. So 200 of the 500 seats in the House of Delegates get chosen through proportional representation. This is a nationwide system, not a small geographic district. And here's what the two look like together. All 500 delegates of the Mexican Congress, 300 chosen in the single-member districts, 200 chosen in this nationwide at-large proportional representation system. So Mexico's system is a little complex because the Senate doesn't have single-member districts, it has multi-member districts. And both chambers, the Senate and the House of Delegates, use proportional representation as well. In the Senate, there are 31 states in Mexico and the district, federal district, or Distrito Federal, or Mexico City, and they all get 3 members per state. The state is the district. So for example, a state like Chihuahua has 3 members. And how does this get selected? Well, there are 128 senators. They all get 6-year terms. 3 of the seats are given, each state gets 3 seats. And how are they chosen? The first 2 seats for each state are awarded to the party that got the highest votes. The third seat, interestingly, is given to the party with the second highest votes. And then they've set aside 32 seats in the Senate that are assigned by proportional representation on a nationwide basis. So 32 seats are set aside for proportional representation. Those are pooled votes from the whole country, not by state. Mexico is bicameral. The people choose their representatives in both chambers. There are single-member districts, multi-member districts, and proportional representation, which leads you to have representation from more parties. Proportional representation, you can see, gives you more choices, greater voice for voters. The smaller parties have a chance. They don't have to compete in a winner-takes-all system where some of them would never be able to win. But it can mean less unity, more division. You've got to have more coalitions to be able to pass legislation a lot of times.